afternoon. It is Fish and Frank's Frank Conversation, and today's subject is all about adapting to change. I myself, as an athlete, have literally adapted to change my whole life, and if I'm totally honest with you, I thought I was pretty good at adapting to change before lockdown occurred. Then I suddenly realised that actually the shortness of breath, like the stresses, the panics I get into, the little tumbleweeds that my head goes into, I kind of find myself in this mess. And all of a sudden, my flexible thinking that I thought was all flexible, I've kind of found, wow, I'm actually not that flexible, and actually I don't adapt that easy to change. Now, we all are all creatures of habits, but today's conversation, frank conversation, because I want this to be relatable and honest to you guys, and I want to be able to help, is with Tracy herself, Tracy Twig. Have I said that right? Tracy Twig, Tracy Twin, Tracy Twig.
Twin.
I said that
Twin.
Yeah, I want it to be honest and frank, and it is literally all about adapting to change. And it is really easy to say, well, I adapt well to change. We might adapt well to change, but then how much we adapt to change is kind of the question. It might be forced upon us, or it might just be something we flow into. And we need to remember that different is okay. We all handle things differently. We all have different ways of doing things, all different coping mechanisms. And today, I kind of think we're just exploring a conversation about different ways and tools of dealing with situations. And I'm obviously very proud and honoured to be talking to Tracy herself. Tracy, you obviously work for Thomas Franks, and you have your own story to tell. And if people don't know, you've got an amazing journey, amazing story yourself. And throughout your journey, you've no doubt had a lot of adaptability, to come through of change. And what the first question, the big opening question I'd like to kind of put to you is basically, what tools have helped you along your journey of your change?
I think the tools that have helped me, first and foremost, is probably my job. I mean, my job and my work gets me through quite a lot, and the support of people around me, family, friends. So yeah, that's probably the main thing that gets me through life, is my adaptability in work and dealing with situations in there. I'm kind of like, I bury my head in the sand, if anything. So I sort of like do a lot of things in work to try and compensate what's going wrong in my private life or things like that. So yeah, work is a big part of my life. Socialization with friends and family is a very big part of my life. So yeah, and that's kind of like how I deal with most things that go on in my life, to be honest with you.
So you just told me that you bury your head in the sand. Now, can you just, in a short summary, like tell me a little bit about your journey, because you've gone through bouts of cancer, as I'm aware, and I can't imagine you like burying your head in the sand, so to say, with that all going on. And you must be a pretty strong character to go through that. And I'm intrigued because for me, the strongest characters are actually probably the most vulnerable, because people do perceive us as strong. But I'm just intrigued what you said when you said you bury your head in the sand. I do not believe you, Tracy.
Well, I mean, my cancer journey started originally about 13 years ago when I was first diagnosed. And I kind of dealt with it quite well, because I was lucky to start with. I only had a lumpectomy, chemo, radio. And the hardest part for me then was the fear of losing my hair. So the thought of this could kill you pretty much didn't cross my mind, to be honest with you. So that was quite easy-ish to sort of deal with. I think my hardest part was when I was re-diagnosed again and stood in front of the surgeon, and he said, you are going to have a bilateral mastectomy, which meant both of my breasts would be cut off. And I had that whole fear again of losing my femininity and having to deal with how I was going to cope with no breasts, how long it would be before I could undergo reconstruction, how long it would be if I survived it. And I suppose that then became quite a daunting reality. And I think I dealt with that by sticking my head in the sand and going back to work and thinking, well, we'll deal with it. But in the meantime, I'll go and bake a cake. So to me, my whole life is sort of like, I'm a big foodie, and hence the fact I work for Thomas Franks. And I think that's the way I deal with life. It's like, whatever happens, let's just have something to eat and a few drinks and we'll get over it. And to me, that's kind of like my lifestyle all over. I'm a big entertainer, so I'll cook for friends and have people over for drinks, or I'll go out and eat, and I tend to like deal with life in that sort of aspect because that's how I feel comfortable. And
Tracy, you just said to me that one of your biggest fears was actually losing your hair.
yeah,
And then you're sat with me, and I have it as a daily living thing that actually I absolutely detest. And it's the biggest thing that gets me down and makes me almost short of breath and tearful and panicked about, because I, yeah, like I am so lucky. I feel like an overwhelming part of like luck that I haven't had cancer, and that's the first thing actually I get asked a lot is how long's your treatment or are you recovering? And you know, for someone to go through what you've gone through, and the worst thing you're worried about was losing your hair, why?
I think it's
So I
because
know why, but I'm interested in your why.
I think the reason why is because when you lose your hair, people automatically say to you, "What's the matter with you?" And they know then that you've got an illness of some sort. I mean, my mastectomy, to be honest with you, as hard as that was when I undressed and looked in the mirror, no one else knew that was there unless I told them. But as soon as you're faced, along with many ladies that I deal with now through my charity, as soon as you lose your hair, people know you're ill. People know that there's a problem. And like I say, that's a big part of your femininity. And you kind of like, if you go out, people will assume that you're a bloke, and people will assume that, and you get the weirdest of looks when you go to the toilet, when you go into a nightclub, when you anywhere you go, you all you want is to be treated normally because you are normal,
It's
and
in
people
almost.
automatically judge, and people are quite cruel, to be honest with you. So that was probably the reason I was so fearful of it, because people would then know or want to know what I was going through. And initially I wanted to hide the fact because I needed to deal with it for myself before I started to deal with it with other people. So
One of the key tools that I believe has got me through adaptability and this adapting to change, and it sounds like you could be quite similar, is just acceptance, like accepting who you are and what you're about and what you stand for. Myself and Frank touched on it in the initial Fish and Frank's conversation, the first one, about knowing who you are and your values that you stand for, whether it's as a company or an individual person. And I think it's a massive thing when you're dealing with change, you're dealing with something like you've gone through a massive journey. And it's weird because I sit here and to me, it's a story. To you, it's your life and it's reality of your situation, and it isn't just a story. And I think the biggest thing is, alongside the communication, knowing how to talk about things, is acceptance. Would you agree?
oh, definitely. I mean, once I sort of like accepted the journey I was about to take, I kind of like dealt with it. I felt like I was in control of that journey, and the journey wasn't in control of me, if that sort of makes any sense. And that's kind of like how it came about. With a lot of the things that I've done leading from my illness, like starting the charity up and being with the girls in the charity Restore. So that was obviously a massive part of how I coped with what I was going through, and how I still cope, and how I help other people. I mean, something we all say now, because many of the ladies that come in to the show and tells, because that's another way that we deal with things, is some people don't want to talk. I mean, I'm quite a good talker, and most people will tell you that I talk too much. So, but a lot of people don't want to talk. So, in our group, we do like a show and tell. So, people will be invited to come along that are starting their breast cancer journey, or sort of like had the mastectomy and look into different reconstructions, or their BRCA people that have obviously got to go down that journey to decide from whether or not they want to have preventative surgery. So, and we kind of all stand at the front, myself and some of the other ladies that have all been through the journey, and we tell our stories. And then I think the biggest impact, I think, is we also show our results. So, and we kind of like call them show and tells, because we'll tell our story, show the results, and then ladies that are now starting that journey can see what's going to happen to them. Because it's all right looking at it in picture format, but picture formats don't touch on reality. So yeah, and that to me helped me accept my journey as well.
You touched on the fact, Tracy, that you said about not everyone wants to talk. Now, I believe a massive part of overcoming your fears, anxiety, accepting change, you have to talk. Now, I struggle with intrinsic people who don't talk, but what I have learned, we have a deaf girl in our squad, Jodie, and actually what I've learned is that there are different ways of communicating. So for the people who are listening to this, maybe at Thomas Franks, who go, oh, I'm not a talker, actually, I don't want people to know my business, and you do get those people. Would there be a bit of advice you can give to them about communication and ways of communicating, perhaps?
Well, while we've been on lockdown, actually, it's been quite nice that we've had kind of like emails and that from Holly at HR, and we've had weekly talks, and which have been really great. I mean, Frank's gone out of his way to make sure in his busy schedule he's kind of like invited us on a conference call each week, and his first question to us is, how are you doing? What have you been up to? Which to me just alleviates that this isn't about work, this is about us, this is about me, this is how I'm doing. And I think if you ask somebody, and something I learned the other day, which was quite good, is it's always good to say, do you fancy a quick cuppa? And it's amazing what you get from a response of, do you want a quick cuppa? And people kind of like open up. So I think as you go through your journey, you sort of learn from it as well. So which potentially can help other people when you think that they're struggling. So yeah, so other people, it's like just ask them if they want a cuppa and a chat, or yeah.
I think as well, there's a lot to be said about, like when you said about just by Frank asking the question, how are you? Or, you know, or maybe having those weekly conversations, whether it's with Holly or someone from work, it makes you feel valued. So actually, you don't have to be a talker. We're not saying, you know, to accept change, you have to be good at communicating. What we're saying is that to kind of, I feel like if I'm rephrasing it, to accept change and be adaptable and maybe have this new way of living, it's about being open-minded to different ways of communicating, and actually just asking the question, are you okay? Or how are you? Or asking for that cup of tea, because that values the individual. And I really believe that if you empower the person next to you, then you'll empower yourself, because the way you help others, you know, if you help other people, you kind of, you get that feeling inside that it's just a nice feeling, isn't it? Because you know that you've helped somebody else.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Every time I come out of the show and tells, or I come out of a meeting that somebody said to me, have you got a minute? I've got a problem. You feel like you've helped them, and you may or may not be able to solve their problem, but I'm a great believer in a problem shared is a problem halved. So, and it's amazing how just a little chat with somebody can make things better. I mean, I have and did try at one stage through my journey speaking to a counsellor. And for me personally, that really didn't do anything. I came out feeling probably worse. So for me, that didn't help. But well, every time I've had a problem, I'll pick up the phone and I'll chat to my friends and I'll say, do you fancy coming over? And they'll come over. I do what I do best, and that's normally cook for everybody. And we'll sit down, we'll have a few gins, we'll have a nice meal. And I walk away from that evening thinking, I feel so much better about myself.
That's cool.
Purely because I'm with people that I talk to. So that's probably the way I accept things and the way I deal with things, I think.
Tracy, how easy do you find it focusing on the controllables? Like we talk about it all the time, especially in England, like control the controllables, control what you can, don't fight what you can't. You know, it's all about small wins and small margins, and they kind of counter to the bigger ones. And when I'm on the field, when I'm doing what I do and aim at the Olympic Games, and you know, when I'm doing that, I feel really in control about anxiety and fear of the unknown. And you know, I thrive on pressure. But since I've been locked down, I've noticed that actually the way I deal with anxiety and pressure and fear is by just going to play rugby. Now, for me, that's been taken from me. So the way I deal with stuff, I suppose I'm trying to find new ways of dealing with stuff. But how well would you say, or have you not had to, just be honest, have you had to like focus on the controllables, or have you literally just sometimes just gone, oh my gosh, I've lost it, and I'm writing this week off or writing this day off?
I normally curse and swear a little bit, I'm not going to lie. So, but I think a lot of it comes from something my brother told me, and has told me several times, because he's quite level-headed compared to me, is if you can't control it, it's about with your control, why keep beating yourself up about it? And that actually really rings true, because if I can't control it and I can't get the answer to it, why am I beating myself up about it? And I kind of look at things like that now. So I will try to achieve what I want to get to. But if it seriously is out of my control, I'll just go, do you know what? I'm going to ask somebody else to help me with that one. And I'll try and get somebody else to help me with it. And if it's not achievable, which touch wood, nothing ever is unachievable, then I think I'll just bin it. So that's probably.
I'm glad you said that, because last week when we were speaking to Frank, we spoke about the mindset. And what you've done there, if I kind of relate last week to this week, is the fact that you've actually said, if you can control it, you do. If you can't, you bin it. But you've probably had to train your brain to do that. Would you agree?
Massively. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I was probably a totally different person before I became ill. Becoming ill made me look at life differently. Before I used to panic about everything. I used to stress about everything. And now, after what I've been through, I kind of like look at life and think, well, it is what it is. And you can only do so much to achieve that goal. And if that goal seriously is unattainable, as hard as you keep going and beating yourself up about it, unless you get the help and the tools you need to achieve that, you're never going to achieve it. So somewhere along the line, sometimes you have to ask for help. And if you don't ask for help, you're probably never going to achieve what you want to achieve.
Do you think that you have to go through, there's no real answer to this, but do you think you have to be someone who experiences that side of life to appreciate it, or do you think you can learn the tools without having that? So for people at Thomas Frank's, okay, like if they've been through hard times, they'll probably go, oh, I can relate to that. I know what I mean. Naturally, I could try that. But for someone who probably hasn't gone through those hard times, who doesn't probably recognize fear or doesn't recognize the unknown or anxiety, or they don't recognize that not adapting to change, do you think people need to go through something to come out the other side, or do you think actually they can learn the tools if they're open-minded?
Probably a bit of both, really, I suppose. I mean, I think that prior to being ill, I probably took life for granted. But now I don't tend to take things for granted quite as much. So I think until you've actually had a little bit of a wake-up call, you probably do take things for granted. And you assume that it will happen. And I think it's not until you actually come up against a barrier that you realise, whether it be an illness or something else that you can't deal with, I think you've got to come up to that barrier to realise that this is where you need to ask for help. This is where you need to be more open-minded to achieve your goals, because nobody's born with the know-how to achieve everything, and nobody knows everything. So
did you, like, Tracy, what was the biggest fear that you went through? So obviously when you lost your hair, okay, did you wear a wig?
No, I was lucky. It was really, really thin, but I didn't end up totally bald. But it was very, very thin. I wore the cold cap, and I had it cut really short, but it was very thin, and there was like.
What were you scared of?
I don't, like I say, I think being totally bald was my worst fear. I don't think I once feared dying, because that just didn't seem to come into. So yeah, I think that was probably my worst fear out of the whole journey I undertook. And because, like I say, that was the part of me that would show everybody that I was ill. And all the time I still had hair on my head, I wasn't ill in everybody else's eyes, and I was coping all right. And I hid behind a smile, if anything. And then when I got home, I don't think I ever cried in front of anybody. I'd hide in the bathroom, and no, never. I think the only time I cried was probably when I was in theatre having reconstruction. I'd literally had my 10.5-hour surgery, and then that night I'd got a blood clot and went back to theatre. And then the next morning I kind of sat up in the chair, and it all went horribly wrong, because the whole of my chest just started to go a horrible black funny colour. And my surgeon was called at the time, and he was absolutely lovely. And like I said to you earlier in our conversation, he's actually now patron of our charity. He's Mark, and he just settled me down totally. And he said, don't you worry, we're going to get you back into theatre, and we're going to make it right. And I think in my whole journey, he was probably the only person that I cried in front of. And that was probably because it was a fear I couldn't control. because I was about to like lose the breast that I'd spent all day in surgery for the day before, and it was all going horribly wrong, and there was nothing I could do to control it. And he sort of like calmed me down and sort of like, yeah, held my hand, if that's the way you want to put it, and he took me back
I
in
think
surgery and saved my breasts.
there's a lot to be said about what you're saying there, and trusting people on your journey and trusting the process. Like, I find it really hard to trust. I trust myself, I trust the process, but then I don't think I'm very good at trusting new people in my team. So if someone suddenly comes in, or a new relationship, or a new teammate, or something, I take time to trust people. But it's a massive part, I think, of adapting to change, because you've got to be, I feel like you've really got to be vulnerable and let yourself go and let people see your whole colours. Now, I'm not saying for someone who's maybe intrinsic and doesn't show their own colours, it doesn't mean they're not adapting or they're struggling. That's their way. But I just truly believe if someone does struggle with adapting to change, then being vulnerable, being open, but trusting people is a really, really big part of it.
Yeah, I think trust is a big part, and I think everybody's got a vulnerable side, and it's like I'm kind of two people, to say. I put my chef whites on and I get in the kitchen and I'm this strong, sort of like bolshy, sort of like I can do it, and I am very much like that. And I'll get in the kitchen and I'm a doer and I get the job done, and then on the other side, when I do my charity work, I'm very much the caring, listening. It's like I'm two different people all molded into one, and I think that's part of how I've dealt with a lot of my life. I sort of like, in some senses, I put my chef whites on and get in the kitchen because I can be that different person. I can be that person that's a doer and achiever, and I turn the food out, I get the meals out on time, I produce good quality, and that to me is how I deal with life. And like I say, my work is a big part of my life, and when things go wrong, I cook because that's how I deal with it. So yeah.
Do you think there's still a stigma around chefs and being strong and having to be perceived a certain way?
I still think, from a female perspective in the kitchen, it is more so in the hotels and restaurants, still very much a male orientated area of the trade. I mean, they always see in hotels and restaurants that it's the females that are the waitresses and the males are the chefs. And so, yeah, and I actually started my career in like restaurants, and then obviously worked up into hotel basis. And it's only been the last sort of 5 years I've been in contract catering. So I think contract catering is a lot more acceptable of the female in the role. And also the fact that with like Thomas Franks and a lot of the other companies that deal with schools, the female role is very much needed because a lot of the schools are term time only. So in that respect, I think it's really great for the girls to get the opportunity, because they're always the ones that are at home bringing up the children. And so, and the thing is, we're very passionate about what we do. And I mean, I've never had children because unfortunately along my journey I've lost my ovaries and my fallopian tube, so that's never going to happen. But I know a lot of the females that I work with have juggled being a mother and their career, and they're as passionate as I am about it. But yeah, very much so in hotels, it's still very male orientated. In the contract catering side of things, it's a lot more for the female chefs. So yeah.
I think it's still I don't want this to become male versus female, but I think there's so much to be said about female. There's still a difference, isn't there, between male and female, whatever it is, whether it's in sport, business, and the chefs. But on a lighter note, Tracy, number one, I just want to say thank you for being so honest and open about your story. I didn't know if you were going to get upset or not, because when I talk about my story, I get pretty upset. And I think because there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of fight in me. I know what I've gone through, and what you've gone through. No one will ever really understand what you've gone through. And I just want to say I appreciate you sharing your journey with everyone and myself. I appreciate that time, and I appreciate that. And just before I summarise acceptance of change and what we've talked about, got one question for you. Do you see crying or tears as a weakness? Yes or no?
No, no, definitely not. definitely not.
So when you kind of wanted to cry but you didn't, what was it? Did you just hold yourself together? What was it, Tracy?
I think it was more for my benefit, because I think if I'd have broke down in front of somebody else,
Yeah.
I feel that I would have lost control. So all the time
Okay.
I hold the tears back, I kind of like feel like I'm in control, and all the time I'm in control, I feel like I'm dealing with things better from my
Right.
perspective. So yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously I'm a rugby player, and on the pitch I'm this big, hard, strong character. But off the pitch, I can literally break down in tears like that. Um, and I've always been like it from a young kid. I've obviously gone through a lot of trauma of like, as a child and into my career and stuff. But I can almost be on the verge of tears all the time. But then I can switch a switch and just go, right, I'm on this, and nothing's going to touch me, nothing's going to get in my way. And I have that determination to keep going. So I was just interested to see what your thoughts were. So if we were to summarize this with listening to your story and having the chat we had, I think there are some real key areas that I believe that Thomas Frank's people and hopefully other people who listen to this could really, really learn from. For me, different types of communication. Um, you don't have to be a big communicator to accept change, but you just need to know yourself well enough. You need to accept the situation. I think that's the biggest one, is probably acceptance. We all say, well, I accept it, I'm okay. Are you though? So just truly looking in the mirror, and we both have a mirror behind us, but truly looking in the mirror to go, actually, who am I and what do I stand for? And am I being honest with myself, or am I just covering it up? I think that's a real big one, because I think, it's easy to look in the mirror and go, well, I'm fine about it. Are we really okay with it? There's a difference for me. And then I think, and you would have gone through this journey, we haven't touched upon it that much, but I think having new realistic goals. So along your journey, like you said, you didn't start a family because of what you went through, but actually you probably had to really divert your path, from what I can hear, because of what happened. And how many people actually realistically go, actually, this has happened now, I need to realistically change my path and change my goals accordingly. And I think the third one is controlling the controllables, which I still need to be able to do. And I think they're not key factors that once you've done it once, you're okay. They're things that are ongoing, aren't they? They're tools that have to be practiced. They have to be part of the conscious brain in my head. And I don't know what you think, Tracy, but I really think they have to be part of the conscious everyday life until they become habitual. And once they become part of your life and they become habits, then we have to keep working on stuff. You're forever working on yourself. You don't just have one gym program that lasts 20 years. Do you change your time, you change your nutrients, you change your hairstyle, you change your clothes, you change everything. And I think there's a real fine line between changing and growing. And a lot of people see some things we might talk about as, well, I'm not going to change. We're not asking you to change, we're asking you to accept and deal with controllables and focus on new realistic things, but grow as a person. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we all grow gradually, and I think how you like control things in your life depends on how you're going to end up accepting them. I mean, my acceptance was that I was going to lose my breasts. I was going to end up like having to wait 7 months to have my reconstruction. So as soon as I accepted that, I then channeled my energy into other things. And like I say, this is where the other girls that I went through the journey with helped as well. And like I say, we then, if anything, we probably critiqued our journeys, which is how our charity Restore came about, because we actually felt that these aspects weren't dealt with while we went through our journeys. And we kind of said, well, maybe we need to do something to make these happen. So Restore came about from myself, Claire, Caroline, and a few of the other ladies. And we've obviously got a couple of breast nurses that help us with anything medical wise. So we've got a great team that do it. But this was the way we channeled our energies and put ourselves back in control of things, I suppose. And as a person, I've probably grown through doing that, and I've also learned through doing that. And it's made me a better person, a more caring person, and also filled that gap that I felt was missing when I went through my journey. So now we offer this service to other ladies that are going through the journeys that we went through, because we felt that this was missing from our journeys.
I
So
love that.
hopefully that helps, really, and it helps
Brilliant.
me as a person.
Yeah, I get that. It's like when you talk about your story, it does help. It does help yourself, doesn't it? Because it's almost like you just. I feel like it becomes almost like a weight off your mind, and you've shared your problems and you've offloaded, and someone else understands you. And the biggest thing I feel for me is to be understood, you know, because it's part of what you've gone through. Tracy, I just want to say thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope you kind of found it like rewarding, and hopefully you can take something from it. And I really hope that everyone from Thomas Frank's listen to this and go, actually, I'm going to try that, you know, and just be open-minded to things that maybe they're going through, so we can all adapt better to change. And if we get a second, third wave, and you know, when life gets a bit hectic, especially for the winter, when the nights draw closer and it gets darker, it can be harder. Just draw upon this and go, actually, I'm going to control what I can and focus on the good things and get balance in my life and get happy that way. But I just want to say thank you.
I just want to say thank you very much to you, Heather. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. And I'd just like to say good luck in Tokyo 2021.
See ya.
Bye. Bye.